See how it goes. All right. Well, I'm live. I will wait a minute or two before people get on, and while people are coming online, you know. Hello. Well, good morning. If anyone's on, good morning. I didn't have the squirrel cam set up today because I've got a whole new whole new computer set up here, and I couldn't get the second webcam to work on it. Didn't really try very hard though, so I just figured it wasn't that important. But I'll try later. I need to refill the feeder. It is currently empty. Oh, hey. Looks like I got 10 viewers. Great. Good morning. Good to see you all, or good for you to see me, I guess. I don't know. So hope you all are doing all right. I'm in the same place as I have been, but I'm using a new computer, the one that I've mentioned possibly being able to repair. I did get it working, so I'm using it, and I'm hoping that it's streaming okay and not lagging or behaving strangely. So let me know if it is weird, or if you see a lag, or if the audio is not great. I had to reset up the OBS software and do things. So that's all. It's all very different on this computer. So hopefully it still works. If you have any issues, let me know as soon as you notice them, so that I can try to do something about it. But as far as I can tell, it's working okay. As far as audio syncing with the visuals and just the basic stream video quality. Hopefully that's acceptable. So yeah. All right. Well, so today I do have kind of a general question for discussion, but mostly I'm interested in explaining some things to you all, and kind of what's going to happen over the next couple of weeks for this class, as I plan on things a little differently than what we normally had, what I originally had planned. So let me put it in here. So here's a discussion for the I'll say a general discussion. On the stream today. So have you heard about the new grading options for the spring? What do you think? So hopefully you've heard by now that there is a new set of grading options for the spring, and so I'm curious what you think about those options, to see if, I'm curious just for feedback, but I also want to kind of help you understand the options within the context of this class. But I'm interested in generally what your thoughts are about it. Let's see, I don't have that pulled up, but let me see, it's in my email, I think. Just got the email this morning with the copy of the text that you all received. Oops, no. Yeah, so this is the email from Rita Dunstan, the registrar, that you received, and now that I'm seeing, which is that you now have this set of options, and I'm still trying to understand exactly how it works. So if you have a question, I can try to explain, but I'm also still trying to figure it out along with you. So what do you think? I saw a couple people typing. I'm okay. I'll try to narrate my explanation of what this is, but basically, we're trying to give you all options that recognize the extraordinary difficulties that this semester has presented for everyone. And so it's ways to avoid basically a bad grade because of those differences. So the extraordinary differences that we're experiencing. So there's basically now, I guess, 3 options, it looks like, into this new grading schema, which is optional. You don't have to switch into this. As far as I can tell, pass-fail is still an option, but otherwise you'd be on the regular letter grade or pass-fail, or you could switch to this, which is you can either get credit, you can get P19, or you can get no credit. So the credit means that C or higher, and it's equivalent to a C or higher, and it accounts for everything that the class normally would: gen ed, the major, or prerequisites or co-requisites. The P19 is equivalent to a pass grade, but I guess as far as I read this, it looks like the difference is that the P19 doesn't count for a prerequisite for something else. So I don't know. That still could be a good option for a lot of things. So it counts for major requirements and general education. So that still could be a good choice for some classes, I would say. And then no credit is for failing grades, but if I read this correctly, it's not credit, but it's also not like an F, where an F would normally impact your GPA. In this whole schema here, there's no impact on your GPA. So that's that's my understanding of those options, but I want to make sure you see here. So okay, so yeah, so Lucia, actually, a D is normally a passing grade, right? That is normally what you need. There's the phrase D's get degrees. There's sometimes where getting a D is good enough. So let's see. I'll just reply here to Lucia. Indeed. Good. D's get degrees. Sometimes that's the case. Yeah, so it certainly does seem helpful to many people. Yeah, I got a lot of people on here this morning. Yeah, good to see this many people on the stream. So Emily's saying it's fair. Yeah, I guess I could do a poll in here, right? That'd be kind of curious. Or do I have? Maybe I don't have the poll integration. There's a poll integration you can do for Slack, and I don't think I have that on this workspace. Yeah. I think that's the question many people are asking themselves. Amber, I think that's that is kind of the essential question, and that's what I think people are trying to figure out. I think I guess the only downside I can see to this this alternative grading schema is the GPA. If you are in a situation where you need to pull up your GPA, or you feel like the grades you're currently planning to get will pull up your grade, I think that's something that an opportunity you would miss if you switch to this alternative grading schema, the flexible grading schema. That said, I like this flexibility. So in terms of kind of taking certain kinds of stress out of the semester, I think there's a lot to be said for this schema. And yeah, certainly it's up to any one of you to choose, to opt in or not. Okay, so lots of, I'll just type some messages here in Slack. I think there are good points on both sides. I think the main think the main value is that of keeping exactly. Let me see. Okay. Thinking about keeping the letter grade is potentially helping your GPA. So how does this work, Marcus? Marcus has shared a straw poll. Fair or unfair? So I guess you mean the flexible grading option? I think it's fair. I guess the tricky part is just the fact that it's an option, and so because it's an option with some complex implications, it might be something that a student opts into or fails to in ways that, you know, it makes the opportunity to make the wrong decision, and that's sort of unfair. But or not unfair, but it could be unfortunate. But as Tess points out, and Amber also, like, you have until April 24th to decide, so that gives you all the time to figure out how you're going to do. So, I can't speak for your other classes, but for DGST 101, something to keep in mind is that, and I'm typing as I talk here, so it's kind of awkward, but we'll get it done. I'm pretty sure the average grade for this class is an A minus. I mean, that's the average grade overall when I've taught this class, so that's something to keep in mind, is that most people tend to do pretty well in this class. In other words, you know, I ask a lot for this class, but students really deliver a lot, and I help learn a lot. So I think if everyone ends up with A's, that's not a problem for me. And since you can do this grading schema course by course or across the semester, I would probably argue in most cases, I mean, we could of course talk about your specific considerations, but I would say the default position I would argue for everyone taking this class is to keep the letter grade, because you'll probably get an A or an A minus. I mean, that's a good situation for most people, so that's going to help your GPA. That said, if you'd rather just not worry about it, like, that's totally fine too. If you'd rather switch into this alternative schema, the flexible grading, that's obviously your choice, and that's something that will be fine as far as meeting the prerequisite for DGST 395. If that's why, if you're in this course in order to complete that prerequisite or to complete the major requirement, certainly you will. If you make it to the end, you certainly will. So let's see. All right, so good. Okay, thanks for putting this together, Marcus. Looks like the poll is, most of you are saying fair, and then 2 are undecided. I think undecided is obviously a reasonable place to be too, until we kind of figure out some of the implications. When I say implications, there's I think some departments, majors, you know, they're going to probably come up with what they mean by a C minus, or they'll do other things to kind of, I don't know, help students understand what the requirements are in order to achieve a certain grade, or the C or the D. But again, for my class, for this one, I think most of you will get A's, so you should probably stay with this class, keep the letter grade for this class. But that's up to you, obviously. All right, so I haven't heard any issues. If you, like, the stream seems to be working okay with this computer, so if not, if you see it lagging or anything gets weird, let me know, especially maybe in the Twitch chat, to see if I can improve those things, or at least to confirm that they're working. Okay, so a lot of you have turned in your digital archaeology project, which is great. If you're still working on it, that's great too. But we're going to move on, or I'm going to move on today to the next and really final project for this class, which is focusing on digital methodology. There is something after this, but it's more of a general reflection, wrap-up, portfolio kind of thing. So the last actual bit of work here is going to be on what I call digital methodology. So I wanted to spend the rest of the time on the stream here explaining that project, and then going through some of your options for that, and kind of giving you the layout for the next few weeks as we work through it. So if you have questions as I'm going, definitely post them in Slack so I can try to respond there, or I'll try to respond on stream here. Just so you know the schedule, so the next So today I'm going to give you the general overview of the next few weeks and this methodology project, and then each live stream from now on, for the next week and a half or so, is going to be me going through one of the options, one of the modules for digital methodology in some detail, with an invitation for all of you to try something out within that module. So you're not committing to a module yet. This is different than what we've done in the past. So you don't need to commit to a module until I think the 13th. But that schedule is on the assignment, which I'll go to now so I can explain that. Okay, so this is the assignment page in Canvas, and I've already changed it. I went ahead and tweaked it a little bit, so this isn't like archaeology where there's an alternative version of the assignment. The one version here is correct, I think, in terms of what I want you all to do with that, given, of course, all the differences of this semester. And so, yeah, this general preamble here is a little bit off here, but the dates are the main thing I wanted you to pay attention to in here in terms of what I changed. So kind of like before, you're going to be going into the modules here, and there's a group on the website, DGST101.net, that are labeled methodology. I'll talk a little about each of these shortly. But you'll be choosing one of those to work on for a week or so and develop a project in. And as you develop this project, it's going to be some research and some engagement with a tool. And then at the end of that, you're going to share the results of that work, that research, or that experiment in a web page on your website. So that web page can be a static HTML page if you want, or just a WordPress page. But it should be well designed, and it should present the argument or the findings of the research that you did. Now, when I usually do this assignment, I do require an HTML page, and I spend a lot of time teaching how to code HTML. If you still want to do that, then by all means, there's lots of ways you can learn HTML on your own. And in fact, I think a lot of students do that. Like I teach it, but they also learn on their own, and between those two things, they get a good sense of it. So if you want, I can help you figure out some HTML things, but I think most of you probably will choose just a static WordPress page, and that's perfectly reasonable given the circumstances. But this is going to be something that exists separate from your blog as a page on WordPress, and it should present the findings of your work. And I'll show you what I mean by findings in a moment, but that's what we're working toward. Okay, so this is the timeline. Today is the 30th, and so today, as it says here, I'm going to give you the general introduction, which is what I'm doing now. Then for the next few days, I will be live streaming about one of the modules in some detail, and as I do those streams, there will be some kind of activity or kind of small-scale project for you to try out to try to understand what that module is focusing on. So you are going to be choosing by the 13th which one you're going to focus on. And then spend the rest of the semester working on that, and up to the 24th. So there's still lots of time to decide and think about these things. All right, so when we're talking about digital methodology, remember we looked at digital creativity initially, digital culture, now we're looking at digital methodology, and this is where we're really using digital tools to ask and answer a question, solve a problem, or explain something complicated and important using those digital tools. So this gets a bit more technical, a bit more wonky than the earlier ones, and that's why we put it at the end. We kind of build up to this one, and there are lots of the modules here are actually pretty detailed in terms of what they're recommending, as opposed to the earlier modules, which were much more open-ended. So let me just give you a sense of what each of these are, and then take any questions. No questions coming in yet from Slack. Okay, so you can find these all here. There are actually a couple more that I'm going to be adding, maybe, but probably not by the time you are looking at these and making decisions. I've been working on the new version of this website. Kind of lost some steam on that given the circumstances, but I do plan on doing that where I have a couple of much better options for some of these modules, but these are still pretty good. All right, so these are not in any particular order, so I'm just going to kind of go through these. So in text analysis, what we're doing is essentially it's something that's called digital humanities, maybe, where we try to understand a large group of texts using computer programs to draw conclusions about them. And I'm teaching a whole class on this right now, actually, a senior seminar. where students are taking, for example, every book written by Edgar Allan Poe and then trying to extract key features of his works over time to understand how his writing evolves, and then graph it, like basically end up with a graph. So this is basically going to be different things you can do with texts and end up with graphs. And it's probably the best way to demonstrate the sort of thing that we're doing here. This is a couple of examples of text analysis. So this is what's called the Google's Ngram viewer, and this is doing text analysis. Sort of, I mean, it's looking for specific phrases and their frequency of occurrence over the corpus of all the books that Google Books has in it. So these are all different baseball teams. Obviously, that was just the example that came up there. But it kind of shows you that over time, not only have the Yankees been pretty successful as a baseball team, but like they get mentioned a lot more just in the documents that are in this corpus. So that's kind of interesting. Like it's sort of a chicken egg question. If you take a look at this is a tool called Voyant Tools, and I probably will recommend you use this if you are interested in this module. It's this is cool. So this is, what is this view of it? Voyant has different windows in it. I don't remember why I linked to this exact one, but I'll show you what it looks like in the default view. And the default view here, this is loading all of the novels by Jane Austen, but normally you would have your own group of novels or other texts that you load into this, and then you start exploring it with these different tools. So it does things like a word cloud, which is a pretty familiar kind of visualization. Also things like this context or a concordance. You can also learn about the vocabulary density, the average words per sentence, and the other kind of statistical measurements of these documents. And if you look over here, just at these, it is kind of interesting. I mean, I don't know what else. You have to do some work to figure out if a particular thing is meaningful sometimes. But let me turn off these. If you look at think, there is a slight upward trend in the word think in Jane Austen's corpus over time. I don't know if that's enough of a trend to be considered meaningful, but kind of might be. And if you think it is, then you can make an argument that she has an increasing interest in introspection for her characters. I don't know. Yeah, you kind of have to generate a hypothesis after you've seen the data, but that's something that seems kind of a trend that seems kind of interesting. But that's what you would do essentially. Drop your corpus into this text analysis thing. And here's a few. There's lots and lots of resources like this and examples of this. But really, most of the time, I recommend people just get a corpus figured out and then dump it into Voyant and then see what you get, and then then sort of build an argument around that. So when I say build an argument, that's going to be your page that you create on your website that says this is important. Here's the graph that shows what I think that demonstrates this evidence, and then write a conclusion paragraph that says here's why I think that is meaningful. So your project page is going to essentially be a short essay with these things embedded in it. Okay, so if any questions on text analysis, post them in Slack. Again, this is meant to be a general overview, and I will give you a more detailed overview, probably starting with text analysis on Wednesday. All right, digital journalism. So this one is probably the hardest in the sense that doing journalism usually involves a lot of work and research and preparation and having a story and really getting into it. So there are there are pros and cons to consider here. That said, I think there are easier to use tools now, and I have a couple of suggestions that I'm going to add to this. But basically, whenever you're telling a story about the real world, this is where the digital part of this is in the method that you use to tell that story. You kind of did that with Timeline.js on the last project. So this could be something similar to that. But ultimately there's some story, and there's a couple of different examples of this. This is a classic one that gets mentioned a lot called Snowfall. Let's make sure it's working. This is a story about an avalanche, and what's neat about it as an artifact as you scroll through it is it does these different slide in and out kind of things to show you what's going on. This looks like it's like loading a bit. Usually there's a background image there that is failing to load currently. That's okay. It's a bit of an older example now, but it was the first kind of thing that a lot of people noticed that was doing something really interesting in terms of the web presentation of the article. So there's a classic kind of, there's a traditional and strong journalistic narrative here, but it's presented in an interesting way, and that's what I'm interested in talking about. I guess there are also, you've got embedded videos. That's another kind of digitally specific skill. This is another one that I found kind of randomly, and I think this is, hopefully it works here. It's pretty random, but it's this guy. It's about this guy who is, I guess he's a Silicon Valley mayonnaise CEO. I don't really know. I don't remember the whole story, but what's funny about this article and the way it's presented is like he's got this mayonnaise on his face, and then you've got this napkin here, and you can like wipe off the mayonnaise. And the whole article is kind of written around that. Like down here on the bottom left, there's this mayo jar. You've got like instead of headings, you've got these like pulsating blobs of mayonnaise, and it's just like I mean, it's a good story. It's a good investigation into this company, but it's also just like this really funny like web specific presentation of it that I find really entertaining. So it's a good example of digital journalism in that sense. The digital part here again is the presentation of it. Now there are also digital tools that are more about or digital journalism that's more about the data. That's the kind that takes a lot more time, so that kind might not be within the scope of this class, but if that's something you're interested in, then we can try to figure it out. Lots of tools are available. Huffington Post has some APIs you can use. I kind of hate to say it, but with all the coronavirus stuff, there's been a lot of really good data journalism pieces that have come out about it, and different interactive graphs explaining different scenarios and helping people try to understand what's going on with the coronavirus. A lot of that is really good, and also a really good example of digital journalism. I kind of hesitate to show it to you all because I find it really stressful, but it's good in the sense of doing journalism with a digital tool. I may or may not show you some of those to talk about digital journalism when we focus on it that day, but we'll see. Okay, so mapping. Mapping is using maps to make arguments or to understand situations. You might use GIS, for example, if you've used that before, but there's other things as well. There's one I learned about recently that I need to add here called Palladio, which is actually much easier to use than a lot of these other ones. But essentially, we're trying to use a map to understand something. Again, with coronavirus, I guess there's lots of maps, but those are pretty stressful. But a common thing you might do is take all of the places mentioned in a novel and then put those on a map and kind of see what they have in common, or see if they give you a sense of a neighborhood. So you don't have to do this in quite a kind of real world way like you would with journalism. This is just any argument or any kind of idea where you can use a map to explain it. If it's a text like a novel, like if you wanted to map out all the locations in a Jane Austen novel, let's say, you'd have to actually read that novel or just know it really well in order to kind of remember the different locations and then put them on a map and then explain that. So different choices there. Image visualization. So I'm actually going to be renaming this one to cultural analytics because that's a more commonly used term of art, and I think more clear in terms of what that is. This one also is a bit more technical, but I've explained or given you some code here that will work. This is code that you would use on a Mac to do some of the processes that are useful for this module. I have not checked this recently to make sure that still works, but obviously if you don't have a Mac, you wouldn't be able to do it this way anyway. Basically what this is doing, this code is taking a movie, let's say The Godfather, and extracting every frame from it. So you start with a video file on your computer, and you end up with a folder containing tens of thousands of images of that movie. So if that's something you're interested in doing and you can't figure out how to do it on your computer, then I can do that part for you. It's pretty easy. It just kind of takes some time, computational time. What does that sound? Oh, it's a helicopter, I think. So there's some examples of this approach here. You might have actually seen this. This was pretty popular for a while. This idea of taking a movie and turning it into a barcode. Sometimes it's pretty interesting the results you get. So this is Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi, compressed into a barcode. This is the opening credits from The Last Jedi. So you start to see interesting patterns or structures that you maybe didn't think about before. And in order to produce one of these barcodes, you have to start with you compress the frames and then you put them into this presentation of it. I do have a tool I built. So the barcode part of it or other visualizations, you might be able to do here using a web browser. And I say you might because it's limited in certain ways. It has to use your computer's memory, and so if you have a computer that can't handle what you're asking this web page to do, then you might have issues. There's also a couple of other quirks to it that are just kind of unavoidable because this is running in a web browser. Like to do this in like this person who does this, I think they use Photoshop, like a macro or a script for Photoshop. You can also script it in other ways using something called image magic, which is what I would probably do, but I've tried to make it as easy as possible for you to try this out by putting it into this JavaScript version. There's another helicopter. It's pretty loud. I'll let that pass. So another version of this, or another kind of thing you can do once you've extracted all the frames from a movie, is you can combine them all into a single frame by stacking them vertically. So instead of going horizontally left to right, we're now just kind of coming along a z-axis and smushing all these images together into one composite image. And it comes out pretty interestingly. This is an example of Sleeping Beauty. And there's this guy, Kevin Ferguson, who does this and writes about it in scholarly ways. So this is, like what he's doing here with this is kind of what you might do with your project. You can also generate these kinds of things. These are it's called a montage. You can make these with my tool that I created there. So lots of ways you can play with it, but usually the first step is to get that big folder full of all those images. And that can be a tricky step. So if this is something you want to do, and you can't figure out how to do it on your own computer, then let me know and I can help. Okay, so that's image visualization or cultural analytics. And networks is, and this is not very well described here, but this is, oh yeah, we do have a link to Palladio here. But this is anywhere you're using a network to explain a situation. Sometimes students will do actually like literal social networking with this, where they'll try to map their relationships to each other and connections to people they know. That's one option you can do. Let's see. There's actually a guy last semester did a really interesting project with this. I have to find the URL for it. Let me see. Oh yeah. So I do like to show you examples of prior student work whenever I can. Just to kind of give you some inspiration or some ideas of what's possible. So this is, yeah. All right, so this is Alexander Rudenschild from last year. He took this class and he did a map of different, what is this? Like different bands in the Richmond area that have connections with each other. And so it's a map of their different connections and interactions, and you end up with this pretty interesting map of those. So he used Gephi, and that's one of the tools you can use for this, but I think Palladio might be easier. The nice thing about Gephi is that it gives you this HTML output that you can embed in a web page. So if you're making a web page, this is pretty useful. Okay, I guess it looks like these are people's names, and then the bigger dots are band names. So different people who have played in bands together basically is what we're mapping, what he's mapping here. Yeah, another one, by the way, that was done for the mapping module. A few years ago now, the student took the website down for some reason, but it was a map of every county in the eastern United States, and it was a map, like a fully detailed map of every county, and then they were color-coded by name origin. So for counties that were named after someone in England, they were given a specific color. For named after people in France, they were given a different color. Named after something else. One of the most interesting things that map revealed is how there's a lot of counties that are named, especially in the Michigan area, that are named for nothing. That they are just that someone, some cartographer at some point, I forget who, just decided that these should all have Indian sounding names, American Indian sounding names, and so he just made them up. And so those are all color coded a certain way. They're all purple in the student's map, if I remember correctly, and you could see them all in this cluster. Like where do these names come from? They were just literally made up by some guy. So it's pretty interesting to reveal that. And that was a very elaborate project that student did that unfortunately doesn't exist anymore. But for each of these, I'll give you at least one working example that you can be inspired by. Okay, so I've kind of gone through a lot of these things here, and again, I will continue to do that over the next several live streams. I will give you some kind of small scale version of each one of these modules to play with a bit and try something out with, and then you'll be deciding on one to commit to in a couple weeks now, I guess, a week and a half, April 13th. So that's all I had to cover today. I don't want to get into too much detail with these yet. Do you have any questions? If you have any questions that you think that would be good for the live stream, then now is your chance to put them on here for me to answer here. One thing I guess to remind you about if you're still working on the archaeology project, a couple of you I think were surprised by the timeline requirement, or you thought you were done but didn't realize you needed to do a timeline, but I do want you to do a timeline. So a timeline.js, that's the way to replace what we would have done with Omeka, and it's linked. That part of the assignment description is near the bottom, so it's understandable if you missed it or didn't get that far, I guess. But I definitely want you working with timeline.js to present the story of your object that you're researching for that project. So if you haven't done that yet, I'd still like for you to do that. But yeah, otherwise I'll wrap this up pretty soon, I guess. I didn't hear any issues or problems with the audio, so I assume that's going okay for you all, that you can hear me. It's yeah, it's a nice sunny day, I guess. Hopefully stays sunny. I'm gonna probably adjust the squirrel feeder and then see if that does any better. I looked at my neighbor who has similar bird feeders that hang down, and she's got much larger bowls with respect to the size of the bird feeder, and they're much closer. So I'm going to try to reconfigure mine to be closer to hers. I didn't see if hers were successfully defeating squirrels, but that she had several of them set up that way, so I assume she knows what she's doing. So I will keep you updated on the squirrel situation, and hopefully get that camera put out. Okay, so I'm not seeing any questions, but I still have viewers, so I assume that means that you are watching and you're okay with me wrapping up. So if you do have questions, of course, you know how to get in touch. Set up an appointment with me if you can. If, by the way, I am the advisor for many of you, I know. So if I am your advisor and we haven't yet met to talk about your fall registration stuff, we should do that soon. We can also talk about your choice as far as the flexible grading option. That's something that you probably want to think about, and I would be happy to help you kind of think through the implications. There is more information forthcoming about those implications, so you have time to wait if you're not ready to decide, but that's something we should definitely talk about if I'm your advisor. And that's something you should talk about with your advisor. But as I said earlier, I really recommend for this class, probably stick with the letter grade so you can get an A. Like that's the best outcome possible, I think. Okay, well, thanks for watching. I'm going to wrap this up. Of course, this will be archived on YouTube for later, and I'll be back on Wednesday with another live stream where I will take a closer look at one of these, probably text analysis, and give you something to work with and try out on your own. Okay, great. Well, have a good day. I will see you all later.